In the shadows of rebellion, where the fires of zeal burned fierce and wild, there stood a man whose heart beat with unyielding passion, Simon the Zealot. Born into a world of conflict, he was a warrior at his core, a rebel ready to fight against oppression with sword and fury. But destiny had a different path for Simon, a path that would transform the rebel into a messenger of peace, the warrior into a servant of grace. His journey was not just a change of heart, but a revolution of spirit. From the battlegrounds of defiance to the quiet strength of faith, Simon's story is one of redemption and courage. He faced the fires of doubt, the storms of persecution, and the ultimate test of his convictions. Walking alongside the 12, he learned that the greatest battle was not with swords, but within, a fight for truth, love, and salvation. The rebel was reborn, not through violence, but through the power of forgiveness and faith. Join us as we uncover the untold story of Simon the Zealot, the redeemed rebel whose fierce spirit shaped the early church and whose legacy still calls to those who seek courage in the face of darkness. This is the tale of a fighter who found a higher cause, a story of transformation that echoes through the ages. Chapter 1. The Rebel's Roots. Long before Simon walked the dusty roads alongside Jesus, long before he became an apostle, he was a man born into turmoil and rebellion. Simon's early life unfolded in the shadow of an empire's heavy hand. Roman legions occupied his homeland, and the air was thick with tension and unrest. Simon grew up in a world where freedom was a whispered dream and defiance was a way of life. His family belonged to a group known as the Zealots, fierce and secretive warriors dedicated to driving the Romans from their land. From his earliest days, Simon was surrounded by stories of resistance, tales of brave men who fought in the shadows, risking everything for the hope of liberty. As a boy, Simon watched the smoke rising from villages burned by Roman soldiers, heard the cries of the oppressed echoing through narrow streets, and felt a burning anger ignite inside him. That anger was not just rebellion. It was a deep, passionate fire fueled by the desire to protect his people and reclaim their dignity. His training began young. Under the watchful eyes of elders, Simon learned the art of stealth, the discipline of endurance, and the courage to stand firm in the face of overwhelming odds. His hands grew calloused from practice, his body honed for battle, but his heart wrestled with questions that even the fiercest warrior could not ignore. In quiet moments beneath the stars, Simon pondered the cost of endless fighting. Could violence truly bring the freedom they sought? Or was there another way, hidden beyond the clash of swords? These thoughts stirred uneasily within him, even as his zeal for rebellion only grew stronger. At times, Simon's fiery spirit led him into dangerous encounters, skirmishes with Roman patrols, midnight raids, and secret gatherings where plans were whispered in shadows. Each battle, each narrow escape, only hardened his resolve. In the stillness after the fight, the weight of his choices pressed heavy on his soul. His youth was marked by secret meetings in darkened alleys, whispered plans of uprising, and the heavy weight of expectation. To many, Simon was destined to be a fierce leader, a warrior who would carry the flame of resistance forward. Yet fate had other plans. On the horizon was a calling that would challenge everything Simon believed, a call not to war, but to peace, not to anger, but to love. And so, at the edge of rebellion and redemption, Simon's story truly begins. Chapter 2. A Heart Set Ablaze. Simon's passion for justice was not born overnight. It was a flame kindled slowly by years of witnessing oppression and dreaming of freedom. But there was a moment, a spark, when that slow burn erupted into a fierce blaze, igniting his soul with an unstoppable desire to act. It was during one tense evening in Jerusalem, under the cloak of twilight, when Simon stood among a gathering of fellow zealots. The air was charged with whispered plans and solemn oaths, the kind spoken only by those who understood that their cause demanded sacrifice and risk beyond measure. Simon listened as the leaders spoke of Roman cruelty, soldiers who crushed villages under heavy boots, taxes that bled the people dry, and priests who turned blind eyes to injustice. Each word stirred the fire inside him higher. He could feel the pounding of his heart echoing the call to rebellion. The Zealots were not mere rebels. They were warriors of faith and fury, believing that their fight was sanctioned by heaven itself. For Simon, this was no longer a distant dream. It was a mission, a calling. He vowed that he would no longer watch in silence as his people suffered. Training intensified. Days turned into nights filled with the clashing of swords, the whispers of secret meetings, and the careful plotting of strikes against the Roman occupiers. Simon's life became a whirlwind of adrenaline and determination. Every muscle ached, every breath was filled with purpose. But within this fiery devotion was a young man wrestling with the cost of violence. The faces of those caught in the crossfire haunted his thoughts. Mothers weeping for lost sons, children left fatherless. The zeal that burned within him was fierce, but so too was the seed of doubt that questioned whether more bloodshed would truly bring freedom. Even as Simon's fervor grew, so did his inner conflict. Was this path of fire the only way forward? Could there be a different battle, one fought not with swords, but with words and faith? Unbeknownst to him, the answer would come from a source he least expected, a humble teacher whose message would soon turn Simon's world upside down. But in this moment, the rebel was fully ablaze, ready to fight, ready to risk everything, and ready to be changed forever. Chapter 3. The Encounter That Changed Everything. Simon's world had been shaped by years of struggle and rebellion. To him, power was seized through force. Justice was delivered by the sword. Yet, everything he believed was about to be shaken by a single encounter, a meeting with a man named Jesus of Nazareth. It was an ordinary day in Jerusalem when Simon found himself among the throngs drawn to hear this unusual teacher. The crowds whispered tales of miracles and words that stirred hearts, and Simon, ever curious yet skeptical, pushed through the gathering to listen. Jesus stood calmly, his eyes filled with a calm authority that seemed to reach beyond the noise of the restless city. His voice did not call for uprising or war, but spoke instead of love, forgiveness, and a kingdom not built on power or conquest. Simon felt a clash inside him, the fire of his zeal burning hot against the gentle yet unyielding words of Jesus. "Love your enemies," the teacher said. "Bless those who curse you. Turn the other cheek." These were not the commands of a warrior. They were words that seemed almost impossible to live by. As Jesus continued, Simon watched him heal the sick, embrace the outcasts, and stand fearlessly before those who sought to silence him. Each act challenged Simon's understanding of strength. How could such mercy be powerful? How could peace overcome oppression? The rebel within Simon wrestled fiercely with these questions. Doubt crept in like a shadow. Was the path of violence truly the only way? Could there be a revolution that began not with swords, but with the transformation of the heart? That day, Simon found himself at a crossroads. The world he knew, built on rebellion and rage, was meeting something radically different, something that promised hope without bloodshed. In quiet moments after the crowd dispersed, Simon wrestled with his own soul. He thought of the suffering he had seen, the families torn apart by war, the endless cycle of hatred. Could Jesus' message be the answer he had long sought, but never dared to believe? It was not an easy decision. To follow Jesus meant leaving behind everything he had fought for, stepping into the unknown, and embracing a cause that many would mock or reject. Yet beneath the conflict, a seed of hope was planted, a hope that would grow and change Simon forever. This encounter marked the beginning of a journey unlike any Simon had imagined, a journey from rebel to redeemed, from warrior to apostle. Chapter 4. Leaving the sword behind. Simon's world was once defined by the clash of swords, the roar of battle, and the fierce determination to overthrow Roman rule by any means necessary. His identity was wrapped tightly around the cause of rebellion, a cause that had shaped his youth and fueled his fire. But then came Jesus, a man whose words were unlike any Simon had ever heard. a man who spoke not of vengeance or revolt, but of love, forgiveness, and peace. Simon stood at a crossroads, the weight of his sword heavy in his hands. He could feel the cold steel against his calloused palms and hear the echo of his past life. The raids, the whispered plots, the blood spilled in the name of freedom. Yet now, before him, was a different kind of battle, one that required not the strength of muscle but the courage of the heart. He remembered the moment when Jesus met his gaze with calm intensity, inviting him to lay down his weapons and follow a new path. At first, Simon recoiled. How could he abandon the fight that had defined him? How could he turn his back on the comrades who trusted him with their lives? The nights that followed were filled with turmoil. Simon wrestled with memories of fallen friends, the faces of families torn apart by violence, and a heavy burden of his own anger. Was it possible to fight for justice without shedding blood? Could peace truly be stronger than the sword? Simon's thoughts drifted to the countless battles he had fought, the narrow escapes, the secret meetings under the cover of darkness, the burning desire for liberation. Each memory burned like a brand, reminding him of the cost of rebellion. Yet amid this storm of doubt, Simon also recalled the gentle acts of Jesus, healing the sick, comforting the outcasts, and standing fearless in the face of danger. These acts were a different kind of power, one that stirred something deep within Simon's soul. Slowly, the rebel began to understand that true strength lay not in destruction, but in restoration. He saw that the kingdom Jesus spoke of was not built on conquest, but on compassion, not on violence, but on sacrifice. This realization did not erase the past, it challenged it. Simon knew the road ahead would be hard. He would have to face those who still called him comrade, those who would label him a traitor. He would have to wrestle with the remnants of his old self every day. But the fire in his heart had changed, from one of rebellion to one of hope. Simon was ready to leave the sword behind and take up a new mission, one that would test his courage in ways he never imagined. This was not the end of the battle. It was the beginning of a greater fight, a fight for the soul of a world yearning for peace. Chapter 5. Among the 12. Simon's new life among the 12 apostles was a world apart from the chaos and violence he had once embraced. It was a brotherhood forged in faith, built on trust, and strengthened by shared purpose. Yet for Simon, the transition was anything but easy. Each day began before dawn with prayers, a time of quiet reflection that tested his restless spirit. The calm was foreign to him. The silence pressed on his heart like a weight, reminding him how far he had come from the battlefield. Surrounded by fishermen, tax collectors, and dreamers, Simon wrestled with his own identity. Who was he now, if not a rebel? He observed Peter's boldness, watching how the impetuous leader spoke with fiery passion but tempered his words with faith. John's gentle kindness softened the edges of the group, offering a quiet strength Simon had never known. Even Thomas, with his doubts and questions, challenged Simon to rethink what it meant to believe. Traveling from town to town, the apostles faced harsh conditions, dusty roads, hostile crowds, and moments when fear threatened to overwhelm hope. Simon's heart still beat fiercely with zeal, but now it was a zeal shaped by love rather than anger. His voice, once raised in defiance, now carried the message of peace and redemption. He shared in meals that were humble but rich in fellowship. Stories were told of miracles, of faith restored, and of the power of forgiveness. Simon listened and learned, the fire inside him slowly transforming from a burning rage to a steady flame of purpose. There were moments when the past beckoned, a memory of a lost friend, the echo of a battle cry. But Simon found new strength in the support of his brothers. They were bound not by blood or rebellion, but by a mission greater than themselves. Simon began to understand that this brotherhood was a different kind of army, one that fought with words and prayers rather than swords. The fierce warrior was becoming a guardian of hope, a protector of the innocent, and a beacon for the lost. In quiet moments, Simon reflected on how far he had come. The journey was not yet over, but he was no longer the man he had been. Among the 12, He was learning that true strength came from surrendering pride, anger, and the thirst for vengeance, and embracing a love that could change the world. Chapter 6: The Silent Witness. In the days leading up to the darkest hours of Jesus' life, Simon found himself in a new role, not as a fiery zealot, but as a quiet observer, a witness to the unfolding tragedy. The air was thick with tension. Whispers of betrayal floated like shadows among the crowds. Fear and uncertainty gripped the hearts of the disciples. Yet Simon's strength lay in his stillness, his silent courage. He watched as Judas, once their brother, slipped away under the cover of darkness to meet the authorities. Simon's mind replayed memories of their shared journeys. The laughter, the teachings, the miracles, now clouded by the sting of treachery. Though turmoil raged within him, he held firm, grounding himself in the faith that had transformed him. As Jesus was arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane, Simon remained close yet hidden, blending into the background like a shadow. He saw the faces of the guards, rough and unyielding, and the anguished cries of those who loved Jesus most. He heard the sharp clash of swords and the hurried footsteps as the arrest unfolded. Through the long, silent nights that followed, Simon's heart ached with a mixture of sorrow and resolve. He reflected on the man who had called him to follow, who had shown a way beyond violence and hatred. The weight of that legacy pressed heavily on Simon's soul. In the cold prison cells and dimly lit courts where Jesus was tried, Simon's presence was a quiet beacon. He absorbed the bitter accusations and false testimonies, the sneers and scorn of those who could not see the truth. His eyes witnessed the injustice, but his faith did not waver. Memories flooded his mind. The Sermon on the Mount, the feeding of the 5,000, the calm authority with which Jesus faced opposition. Simon clung to these moments, letting them strengthen his resolve. He thought of the future, uncertain yet filled with a new kind of hope. Though Jesus was silenced by the world's cruelty, Simon knew the story was far from over. The flame of their mission still burned, carried now in the hearts of the disciples. Simon's silence was a powerful testimony. In an hour when words failed, his steadfast faith spoke volumes. It was a quiet defiance against despair, a shield for the vulnerable, and a promise that the light of truth would not be extinguished. As dawn broke on that fateful morning, Simon prepared himself for the challenges ahead. The path would be difficult and dangerous, but his spirit, tempered by faith and hope, was ready. The silent witness was now a warrior of the Spirit, ready to carry the torch into the darkness and beyond. Chapter 7: Pentecost Fire. The day of Pentecost arrived like a whirlwind, a moment that would change Simon and all the disciples forever. The quiet anticipation of days past gave way to a powerful storm of divine presence. Simon felt it deep within his soul, a fire kindled by the Holy Spirit that burned away fear, doubt, and uncertainty. As tongues of flame descended upon the apostles, Simon was overwhelmed by a surge of energy, unlike anything he had experienced. It was a fire that did not consume but purified, igniting his heart with a fierce, renewed purpose. The zeal that once pushed him to rebellion was now transformed into a burning desire to spread the gospel, the good news of love, redemption, and hope. Simon looked around and saw the faces of his fellow apostles, each touched by the same miraculous power. They spoke in languages unknown to them, declaring the wonders of God to the astonished crowds gathered in Jerusalem. The city buzzed with amazement as people from distant lands heard the message in their own tongues. For Simon, this was more than a miracle. It was a call to action. The fire within him pushed aside all hesitation. The mission was clear: to be a messenger of faith in a world desperate for salvation. Gone were the days of secret meetings and whispered plots. Now Simon stood boldly, proclaiming the truth with a voice strong and unwavering. He traveled far and wide, crossing rugged terrains and hostile lands, carrying the flame of Pentecost to those who had never heard. But this fire was not without its challenges. The same passion that fueled his words also drew opposition. Simon faced threats, rejection, and isolation, yet the Holy Spirit's fire kept him steadfast. In moments of weakness, he recalled the power of that day, how the Spirit had filled him with courage and a fierce joy that no earthly force could extinguish. The transformation was complete. Simon the Zealot, once defined by rebellion and violence, had become Simon the Apostle, a warrior of the Spirit, armed with faith, love, and the eternal fire of Pentecost. This fire would burn within him until his last breath, lighting the way for countless others and igniting hope in the darkest corners of the world. Chapter 8, the mission begins. With the fire of Pentecost burning fiercely within him, Simon took his first steps into a world that was often cold and hostile to the message he carried. The days of comfort and safety were behind him. Ahead lay unknown lands, people suspicious of outsiders, and dangers lurking in every shadow. Simon's mission was clear but daunting: to spread peace where there was conflict, to bring light where darkness reigned, and to offer hope to those trapped in despair. Every journey was a test of faith, endurance, and courage. He traveled through rugged terrains, crossing mountains and deserts, often with little more than the clothes on his back and the determination in his heart. Villages greeted him with suspicion. Pagan temples scoffed at his words. Rulers and priests saw him as a threat to their power. Yet Simon pressed on. In every town, he preached the message of love and redemption, stories of a kingdom not built by swords, but by faith and compassion. His voice, once raised in anger and rebellion, now carried a gentler, yet no less powerful tone. Simon met countless souls along the way, some eager to listen, others hardened by years of fear and hatred. He healed the brokenhearted with his words, comforted the hopeless, and stood firm in the face of persecution. Each encounter deepened his resolve and strengthened his spirit. There were nights spent under starlit skies, praying for guidance and strength. Simon often reflected on his past life as a zealot, amazed at the transformation faith had wrought in him. The fire inside was no longer fueled by rage, but by a fierce love that transcended borders and enemies. His journeys took him farther than he had ever imagined, into lands ruled by kings and priests who sought to silence him. Yet Simon's courage never faltered. His mission was bigger than any obstacle, his faith a shield against every threat. Through storms, dangers, and countless challenges, Simon became more than a messenger. He became a symbol of hope and resilience for those who dared to believe. The mission had begun, and Simon was ready to face whatever lay ahead, knowing that the fire of the Spirit would guide his way. Chapter 9, Brotherhood of Warriors. In the vast and often dangerous landscape of their missionary journey, Simon found an unexpected ally and brother in Judas Thaddeus. Both men shared a past marked by passion and rebellion. Simon the Zealot, once consumed by the fire of revolt against Rome, and Judas, known for his fearless defense of the innocent and his courage in the face of pagan kings. Their bond was forged not only in their shared history, but in their unwavering commitment to a mission greater than themselves. Together, they became a formidable pair, two warriors united not by swords or armies, but by faith and the power of the Spirit. Traveling side by side, Simon and Judas faced countless trials, hostile crowds, threats from authorities, and the ever-present danger of betrayal. Yet in every challenge, they found strength in their brotherhood, supporting one another with encouragement, wisdom, and prayer. They shared stories of their past lives, confessing the anger, fears, and doubts that once consumed them. Through these conversations, their friendship deepened, transforming their former zeal into a shared purpose grounded in love and redemption. Judas, with his reputation as the apostle of impossible causes, inspired Simon to persevere when hope seemed dim. Simon, in turn, brought a fierce determination and unyielding courage that bolstered Judas' resolve. Together, they journeyed to distant lands, Mesopotamia, Syria, and beyond, places where the message of Christ was often met with suspicion or outright hostility. Yet their united front became a beacon of hope, their joint efforts opening hearts and minds to the gospel's transformative power. In quiet moments around campfires, they prayed for guidance and protection, trusting that their brotherhood was part of a divine plan. Their shared mission was more than survival. It was a testament to the power of redemption and the unbreakable bond forged in faith. Through trials and triumphs, Simon and Judas stood shoulder to shoulder, two former rebels now brothers in arms, carrying the light of Christ into the darkest corners of the world. Chapter 10: Confronting Empires. The lands Simon traversed were vast and diverse, but all were marked by the powerful grip of empires that ruled with iron fists and pagan traditions rooted deep in their cultures. To these mighty forces, Simon was not just a traveler or preacher, he was a threat, a rebel not with weapons, but with words that challenged the very foundations of their rule. From the marble halls of Roman governors to the shadowed temples of pagan priests, Simon's message echoed like a clarion call that could not be silenced. He faced authorities who saw his faith as sedition, his hope as defiance, and his courage as rebellion. Yet, Simon stood tall. One such confrontation took place in a bustling provincial city where the Roman prefect, a man hardened by years of battle and politics, summoned Simon before his court. The air was thick with tension as Simon entered, flanked by soldiers and watched by curious citizens. The prefect's gaze was sharp, expecting defiance or fear, but Simon's calm presence unsettled the room. "You preach a kingdom not of this world," the prefect accused. "How do you expect us to tolerate such insolence?" Simon met his gaze steadily. "My kingdom is of love, justice, and peace. It transcends earthly thrones and empires." His words, simple yet profound, planted seeds of doubt in the minds of some listeners. Whispers stirred through the crowd. Was this man truly dangerous, or was he a messenger of something greater? But opposition was fierce. Pagan priests staged elaborate ceremonies to discredit Simon's teachings, attempting to sway the people back to their idols and false gods. They condemned him as a heretic, a disruptor of order. Yet, Simon's spirit was unshaken. He moved through these lands like a storm of hope, challenging the might of empires not with violence, but with unbreakable faith and compassion. Each encounter was a spiritual battle, waged with courage and wisdom. Simon's nights were often filled with prayer and reflection, seeking strength to face the next day's trials. He thought of the men who had come before him, of Jesus' own defiance in the face of empire. The legacy inspired him, reminding Simon that no earthly power could silence the truth. In small villages and great cities alike, Simon's presence sparked a quiet revolution. People drawn by his courage and conviction began to question the empire's authority, yearning for the freedom that faith promised. Though the stakes were high, Simon understood that his mission was not to conquer lands but hearts. The empires might rule by force, but Simon carried a fire within, a fire that no sword or decree could extinguish. His battles were not with armies, but with the darkness that gripped the world, and with every step, Simon the Zealot moved closer to fulfilling his sacred mission. Chapter 11: Trials and Tribulations. Simon's mission was marked not only by triumphs, but by harsh trials that tested the very core of his faith. As he traveled through hostile territories, the opposition intensified. Persecution became a relentless shadow, and imprisonment a bitter reality he could not escape. The first time Simon was arrested, it was in a bustling city where his message of hope had stirred unrest among the local rulers. Dragged before a harsh tribunal, he faced accusations of sedition and blasphemy, charges meant to break his spirit and silence his voice. Yet, in the cold, dark cell that followed, Simon found not despair but a new kind of freedom, a freedom rooted in unwavering faith. Behind iron bars, Simon's thoughts turned inward. He prayed for strength, clarity, and the courage to endure. The walls of the prison, meant to confine him, became a sacred space where his resolve was forged anew. He found ways to minister even in captivity, comforting fellow prisoners, sharing the light of Christ through whispered prayers and stories. But Simon's trials did not end with imprisonment. He faced betrayal from those who once called themselves friends, physical torment meant to break his will, and moments of crushing loneliness that threatened to overwhelm him. Each hardship was a crucible, refining his spirit into something stronger and more radiant. His faith became a shield against fear and pain. Simon drew strength from the memory of Jesus' own suffering, knowing that true victory was not in escaping hardship, but in enduring it with grace and steadfast hope. News of his imprisonment spread, inspiring believers and frightening opponents. Simon's unwavering courage turned his captivity into a testimony that touched hearts far beyond the prison walls. His example became a beacon for those facing their own trials, a reminder that faith could triumph over even the darkest nights. Throughout these tribulations, Simon's mission deepened. He emerged from each test more determined to carry the gospel to the corners of the earth. His spirit, once fueled by rebellion, was now guided by profound peace and unshakable trust in God's plan. In the face of suffering, Simon found his true strength, not in arms or anger, but in faith, hope, and love. Chapter 12, The Rebel's Redemption. Simon's journey was not just one of trials and battles. It was also a path of profound transformation, a story of redemption that illuminated the power of grace in even the fiercest of hearts. Once known for his fiery zeal and rebellious spirit, Simon had been tempered by faith, his anger replaced by a fierce love and unwavering devotion. Yet, it was in moments of divine intervention and miraculous grace that his transformation became undeniable, a testament to the power of God working through a man once lost in rebellion. Stories spread among the early Christian communities of Simon's miraculous healings, wounds that vanished at his touch, illnesses cured by his prayers, and hearts softened by his presence. These miracles were not mere displays of power. They were signs of God's favor and confirmation of Simon's new mission. One particular account tells of a village ravaged by disease, where despair hung heavy in the air. Simon arrived, weary yet resolute, and prayed over the sick with a fervor that stirred the heavens. Slowly, the afflicted began to recover, their faith rekindled by the hope Simon embodied. But more than miracles of the body, Simon's redemption was most evident in the hearts he transformed. Former enemies who became believers, hardened skeptics who found peace, and broken souls who were made whole. His life itself became a living testament to the possibility of change, no matter one's past. Simon himself often reflected on the stark contrast between the man he had been and the man he had become. The rebel who once sought to overthrow earthly powers now submitted humbly to God's greater plan, embracing a mission not of conquest, but of compassion and salvation. His redemption was not a destination, but a journey, marked by continued faithfulness, courage, and the willingness to surrender fully to the Spirit's guidance. Through every hardship and every victory, Simon's heart grew more aligned with the divine purpose set before him. In Simon's story, the early church found a powerful example that no one is beyond the reach of grace, and that even the fiercest rebel can become a humble servant of God's will. Chapter 13, Final Missions. As Simon's years of ministry advanced, the dangers he faced grew more severe, yet his determination only strengthened. His final missions were journeys in a land fraught with hostility and uncertainty, places where the very mention of Christ could provoke violence and scorn. Simon traveled tirelessly, often through rugged terrain and hostile cities, driven by a relentless desire to spread the word. His reputation as a former zealot turned apostle preceded him, attracting both followers eager to hear his message and enemies determined to silence him. In these last chapters of his earthly mission, Simon's resolve was tested as never before. He encountered violent mobs stirred up by pagan priests, corrupt officials who sought to arrest or exile him, and communities hardened by fear and tradition. Yet, through it all, Simon remained unyielding. He preached not only with words, but with a life that embodied the transformative power of faith. His sermons spoke of hope in despair, courage in fear, and love in the face of hatred. He called on his listeners to abandon old divisions and embrace a new brotherhood rooted in Christ. Traveling alongside companions, including his brother-in-arms Judas Thaddeus, Simon forged ahead, knowing that each town reached and each soul touched was a victory against darkness. Their partnership was a testament to redemption and unity, two former rebels now united in divine purpose. Despite the growing risks, Simon did not hesitate to enter the most dangerous territories. His faith was a shield against threats, and his courage inspired those who had lost hope. Stories spread of Simon calming angry crowds with a word, healing the sick with a touch, and standing firm in the face of death. These final missions sealed Simon's legacy as a tireless messenger of peace and salvation, a man who had traded the sword for the gospel and who would not rest until his mission was complete. In the end, Simon's last journeys were not just about spreading the word. They were about embodying it, showing the world that faith could conquer even the greatest dangers. Chapter 14, The Martyr's Crown. Simon's final moments were a crescendo of a life lived boldly for faith. The rebel who once wielded a sword against oppressors now faced death without fear, armed only with an unshakable conviction and the peace of soul redeemed. His martyrdom took place in a land far from his birthplace, a place where pagan traditions ruled and Christian faith was met with fierce hostility. The exact location remains a matter of debate, but the story that echoes through history is clear. Simon faced his execution with courage that shook even his captors. As the executioners approached, Simon did not waver. His calm was like a beacon in the darkness, a radiant light that pierced through the gloom of hatred and violence. Witnesses say he prayed aloud, his voice steady and full of grace, calling upon God's mercy not just for himself but for his enemies. In those final hours, Simon reflected on the journey that had brought him here, the fiery zeal of his youth, the transformative encounter with Christ, the long and perilous missions across hostile lands, and the countless souls touched by his message. Each memory strengthened his resolve, confirming that his sacrifice was not in vain. The crowd gathered was a mix of awe and fear. Some were moved by the steadfastness of this man who faced death with such dignity, while others were hardened by years of resistance to change. But even among the skeptics, Simon's faith planted seeds of wonder and curiosity. Before his death, Simon forgave those who condemned him. His final act was one of love and mercy, embodying the very teachings he had spread across the world. This ultimate forgiveness left an indelible mark on the hearts of many, inspiring conversions and strengthening the fledgling Christian community. Simon's martyrdom was not just an end, it was a new beginning. His death became a powerful symbol of the cost of discipleship and the triumph of faith over fear. It ignited a flame that would burn through centuries, inspiring countless believers to stand firm in their convictions. The crown he received was not of gold or jewels, but a crown of glory reserved for those who laid down their lives for the truth. Simon's legacy lives on as the rebel redeemed, the zealot transformed into a martyr whose faith conquers even death itself. Chapter 15, Legacy of the Redeemed Rebel. Simon the Zealot's journey did not end with his martyrdom. His story, marked by fiery passion, profound transformation, and unyielding faith, resonates through the ages as a beacon of hope and courage for believers around the world. From ancient times to the present day, Simon's legacy stands as a powerful testament to the possibility of redemption, no matter one's past. Once a rebel driven by anger and rebellion, Simon became a symbol of peace, love, and unwavering devotion to Christ. His life proves that even the fiercest hearts can be softened and reshaped by grace. Across centuries, countless believers have drawn strength from Simon's example. Those facing their own battles, doubts, or moments of despair. They find in his story the courage to persevere, the hope to believe and change, and the inspiration to stand firm in faith despite adversity. Churches and communities honor Simon as the patron of those seeking transformation and the courage to follow God's call, even when it means leaving behind old ways and embracing the unknown. His name is invoked in prayers for strength, guidance, and the boldness to act justly and love deeply. Simon's legacy is not confined to history books or distant lands. It lives in the hearts of those who continue to fight for justice, peace, and truth in a world that often resists change. His story reminds us that true rebellion is not against people, but against injustice, fear, and despair, and that redemption is always within reach. In the face of modern challenges, Simon's example encourages believers to transform their zeal into compassionate action, their anger into forgiveness, and their strength into service. His life is a call to be rebels, not against faith, but for a higher cause, armed with love and conviction. As we remember Simon the Zealot, we honor a legacy that transcends time, a legacy of a rebel redeemed, a warrior transformed, and a saint whose courage continues to inspire millions. May his story ignite a fire within each of us, urging us to live boldly, love fiercely, and walk faithfully on the path of redemption. Thank you for joining us on this epic journey through the life of Simon the Zealot, the rebel redeemed. We hope his story inspires you to embrace transformation and courage in your own life. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay tuned for more legendary tales of the apostles. Until next time, keep the fire of faith burning bright.